Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a lead fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode of our Green Building Matters podcast. Every week, I get to interview a green building professional somewhere in the world. Today, I've got Kjell Anderson with us. He's the Director of Sustainable Design at LMN Architects, and he's in the Seattle area. Can't wait to kind of unpack his story. How you doing today?
Doing awesome. Feeling good. The smoke finally cleared from all the wildfires in Seattle. So,
man, I know there's been a big heat wave on the West Coast, and the wildfires starting a little earlier. And it's part of why we do the work we do, right? It's like, man. Well, I know we know each other a little bit in the lead fellow circles, some other circles, and I just can't wait to learn more about you. And so, take us back though. That's where I like to start these interviews. Hey, where'd you grow up, and where'd you go to school?
Yeah, so first 10 years in Centralia, Washington. Next bunch of years in Spokane, Washington. Then I went to school in Chicago for a year, back to school at Gonzaga in Spokane, and then Pullman, WSU, for Washington State University for 5 years to finish up my architecture degree. So I'd say Centralia is where kind of my heart is for hometown. Spokane is where I spent a lot of time, made a lot of friends. Yeah.
Now, did you know you wanted to study architecture? And I even see, later some sustainable building kind of education too. So how did you first know you wanted to study architecture?
I took a hand drafting class in middle school, and that was fascinating. And we were drawing like brick details and all that kind of thing. And so I was like, well, this looks fun. I like to draw, and I like building things. I like woodworking and all that. So why not, get into architecture? It seems like a good balance between all those things. But I was also doing a lot of computer programming at the time, and sat down one day. My mom helped me think through. I was either going to be a violin maker or a computer programmer or an architect. And obviously I chose the architect.
There you go. Oh man, that's a good variety. All right, now what about sustainability? When did that first start showing up for you?
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking about this ahead of time, and I remember my mom bringing us to, busy family, 3 kids, bringing us to a recycling center to get rid of our cans and everything. And, kids pick up on this when their parents do something that's like, I don't know, unusual, or it wasn't unusual for us to go there, but it was certainly not like the thing we needed to do. We could have tossed it all in the trash, but Mom was like, yeah, we should recycle this stuff. And I think that value stuck a little bit. But then when I get into college, there's, people were like, oh, this is a beautiful building. This is Miss Vander Rohe. This is Frank Lloyd Wright. This is a beautiful building, well designed. And we took classes on acoustics and programming and all sorts of things that architects do, waterproofing. Nobody said, this is a sustainable building. Nobody could point to an example of one. And so in the 90s, it was like, well, okay, I'm looking for my place in architecture. Well, there's a big hole here. Nobody can point to a sustainable building, and nobody really can teach me anything about it or much about it, other than, the passive solar handbooks and that kind of thing. That wasn't really sustainable building. It was kind of like in the direction of. And so it's like, well, okay, sure. I'm interested in things, so I'll explore what does it mean to actually do sustainable building.
Man, my mom's from Oregon, Kjell, and my dad's from New York, and somehow they ended up in Georgia. But the early recycling too, for me, that my mom brought over from Oregon, you're right, some of those visuals there. So I love that impacted you too. And as you were putting together this career in architecture, I know you've worked with some firms. We'll hit on that next. Just, have you had any mentors along the way? Sometimes a mentor is someone you look up to, maybe you follow them, but you don't really interact with. And sometimes it's someone, you meet with and they open a door for you. But have there been any other mentors along the way?
It's a really tough question, because if you ask me like a formal mentor, no, I don't think anyone has really shepherded my career or helped me shepherd my career in that kind of way. But there's a lot of people who, and I also don't take direction from people very well. I think that of any potential mentors that I may have had. I would say lots of people have helped me, But nobody has really taken on kind of like what, I don't know, we would define as a mentorship role where they're meet with you once a year and talk directionally about your career. No, that's never happened. And for better or worse, I made it here that way. But I also want to make sure that I help other people, and I've tried to have more directional conversations with other people, help them in the profession.
Shepherding, that's a good word there. Can you connect the dots a little bit? So you get out of college and you're pointing in the right direction here with architecture, and tell us about the early companies you worked for, and then I know a large run at another firm. So just how was that at the time? What are some other companies you've worked with?
Let's see, so I'd worked for 3 different firms in college, in Spokane and then in Bellevue. And then I got out. I worked right away for Rod Jackson. I wanted to work there. Good design firm. They had done some cool stuff, working on light rail stations and lots of public projects. And 55 people, I think, was at the height, and they imploded. And I was part of being laid off in that. But, there was LEED, but there wasn't much sustainable design. LEED was in its infancy in late 90s, early 2000s. So I joined the profession, didn't do much about sustainability until I joined the Young Architects Forum, AIA Young Architects Forum in Seattle, and took on a co-leadership role of that. And then the director, Margaret Rose Hancock, said, hey, we need to redesign our space. So I rallied a team of all volunteer young architects to, design and permit and, almost 2,000 square foot space with, of course, a challenging client because they're architects and people who work with architects. And right away, we said we want to go lead on this, not knowing anything about what that meant, right? We're getting lead certification on this. So we tried, and we were a point or two short of gold. We got silver, but we were the, lead CI pilot program, where I think we were the second AI by a few months to get certified. But it taught me a lot about what the scope is for sustainability. LEED, it's energy, it's water, it's wellness, and all these other things, siting.
Yeah, and just to be a part of any of these pilot programs, you've been doing this a while, I've been doing it a while. As LEED, really the first LEED projects for our listeners, right? They came out in the year 2000. So here you are, early 2000s, and getting an early look at LEED for interiors. And then I guess tell us about the 10 years with Callison, and that's where you, I guess, built on that LEED and green building experience, AIA 2030. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so moved to Callison, I think, in 2003 when I got laid off at RI Jackson, and I worked on Washington Mutual branch banks rollouts. So like doing 90 in a year in Chicago, for example, and looking for ways to plug in sustainability. So, LEED CI and LEED retail was on its way. And so I was like, all right, how do we get, WAMU to do a LEED certified branch bank? And so Barbara Grubb was a mentor, I guess, at the time, and she worked in the retail as well. So she and I led a year-long study to work with consultants, all volunteer, to see if we could do that. And I learned so much along the way of that. It never ended up happening, but we were able to pitch that to other branch banks and other retailers. And, not much came out of it in terms of practical application, but I learned a lot about costing and engineering and all these things. And that got me interested in doing that. But then I moved on from retail. I'm not a shopper. I'm not interested in retail at all, really, from a architecture or from a personal experience perspective. So I moved on to a different studio. And in 2007, maybe, I think I got a hold of Ecotect. And I was like, aha, finally. I was drawing arrows. I was drawing beautiful arrows on projects in India. And I was like, the wind should do this. We'll go in this window and we'll go out this window. And I realized I was, drawing these beautiful arrows and thinking, like, how's the wind supposed to know it's supposed to do that? And it really led to a kind of like I guess I'm BSing this. I really don't know if the wind's going to do this or not, and I don't even know where the wind's coming from. And working in India, I don't even know how hot it gets. So I started diving deep into climate analysis and getting a hold of Ecotect and using that to do analysis on energy systems and others, and would listen to anyone who would talk to me about how energy modeling worked, because that seemed like the key to getting performance out of buildings.
Man, the retail, there's all these different programs now and lead for retail. We work on some banks for another client, and it's just interesting. They're at scale, right? 90 and at one time, and that opportunity. And they kind of get us to kind of current day. So tell us where you've been for about the last 10 years, I guess.
Yeah. So building off of the energy analysis work, and I was a neophyte. I started doing that on projects, and finally I was encouraged to write a letter to the board at Calus and say, hey, we should do this on every project. We can do it for 20 hours on a project and get some useful information out of it. Wouldn't you know, they actually decided that was a good idea. So then I trained people in a bunch of cities and ran a program with 10% of my time being overhead, 90% of my time being dedicated to other projects, to do energy analysis on all of our major projects in this studio, which was 40 or 50 or 60 a year. And then after a year of that, I wrote an application to Green Build 2011, got accepted, and put absolutely every bit of energy I had into speaking, putting the story together. I went through so many iterations. I got so many harsh critiques from my architecture peers and other people, recorded myself, had a speech coach. And when you record yourself and you watch yourself, you realize, oh man, I cannot. No, I fell asleep during my own recording because it's so boring. Not literally. And just worked on it so hard to get this and memorized 35-minute speech, had the slides like so dialed in, had a headache for days before and days after. But I gave the talk, and someone from Rutledge came up and said, would you like to write a book on this? And I was like, whoa, how could I write a book? I'm an architect. I work every day and I don't have any time to do this. But I talked to my wife and she was into it. And so I took off 4 months, wrote a book in 4 months, worked 10, 12, 14 hours a day, taught a college and had a second kid at the same time, all within that 4 months. And it was intense, but I learned so much from interviewing all these people and having to put pen to paper and actually writing down thoughts and conclusions about this. So that then the book led to lots more opportunity. I thought Green Build 2011 was going to be the high point of my career in terms of sustainability, and it wasn't. Wrote a book, and then I've been at LMN for 9 years or so, where I, in 2018, became director of sustainable design and get to spend full time leading all of our projects, all of our clients to, set higher sustainability aspirations and then meet those aspirations within their costs and their budgets and all that stuff. So
that's interesting. You thought you were at that height in 2011, the book, which we'll put a link to in the podcast show notes, right? Design energy simulation for architects, right? The guide to 3D graphics. So we'll put a link there. And so let's just look back once more. Just what are some other accomplishments? What are some other things you're real proud of when you look back?
So many things. I mean, I think a big part of it is just the people that I've worked with and helped mentor or just worked with and enjoyed their company and their wisdom. I would say working directly with clients who have no expressed interest in sustainability. And all of a sudden they realize they can do it. And then they're like, of course I want that. I just thought it was beyond my reach to get there. And so, getting a client to go from LEED Silver to LEED Platinum, that's a big deal. And that's in some ways more interesting than getting a client who wants a net zero building to get a net zero building. I think if someone says in the RFP, we're going to have a net zero building, we have the budget for net zero building, get us there. That's interesting. But if someone says, we're going to do LEED Silver and you can help within their budget, get them to, LEED Zero or LEED Platinum or something, that's where I feel a lot of pride. And so lots of projects where we've helped that happen. And frankly, in the last 4 years, all of our clients have more sustainability aspirations than they did the year before, just accelerating. And so what we helped push our clients to do 2 years ago, now they're like, well, why did we only go there? Like, well, do you realize how hard we pulled you to get you to go set that goal? And now you're so that's the baseline and you want to exceed that. Yeah. Okay.
Is it easier to have the conversation where you're at, Pacific Northwest, or is it just now different challenges, right? Maybe it's, well, we know that there's this minimum, but we want to do more. I don't know how. Is it easier to have the conversation where you're at or not necessarily?
I'm sure it is. We have like the electrification conversation is easier because we have mostly renewable energy. We have lots of hydro out here, right? So the electrification conversation is easier. We have less solar resource generally in Western Washington, so it's harder to have that conversation because it's not as quick of a payback. Yeah, I mean, I think we're out here, but we do in projects. We're doing project at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Doing projects in Madison, Wisconsin. We're doing projects in Michigan. We're doing projects all over the place, and all the clients are receptive right now to, if we can get them within budget to higher goals, they'll go for it, and they'll set those goals and they'll stick to them. So I think the conversation is, whether you go from certified to silver or silver to gold or gold to platinum, or if you go from platinum to zero or something, those are all worthwhile conversations. And I would say that the heroes out there are the people that go from nothing to, a decent goal. That's the real heroes out there, not the people that get it, from an RFP of 0 to 0. That's a little bit easier than getting from no aspirations to, decent aspirations or decent reality, at least.
No, you're right. Sometimes we get to work on these amazing and Uber projects, but there's so many other projects that just need to get it and have that aha. And you're right, just that initiative, that savings alone is sometimes bigger. So projects, there are a couple of really cool projects you've been able to work on, or a couple you're working on you can talk to.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing about architecture is you can't talk about anything that's really exciting because it's NDA. But half our projects right now are going for zero carbon certification. That's so exciting. And almost none of our clients had that initially as an aspiration. And that's exciting for me. Almost all of our projects are all electric, except for the campus projects where they've got to be tied to steam systems that we did. I would say the University of Washington Founders Hall Business School project is one I'm definitely really proud of. Mostly proud of the team on that, the construction team, the design team, and all that. And I had a little hand in that as well. But we intentionally disconnected from the steam system at the University of Washington so that we could reduce our carbon emissions from energy. It's also a really low energy building, all electric. It's mass timber building as well, primarily mass timber structural system. Significant embodied carbon reductions, significant operational carbon reductions, and it's gorgeous. And it's being shown off right now. We're just getting so much press and interest from lots of entities, Department of Energy and others about, like, is this the future of building where it's operational carbon reductions of 93% from a baseline, embodied carbon reductions of 50 to 60% from a baseline. Just really significant, precedent setting, getting towards carbon neutrality in buildings. Those, natural ventilation, so many cool things on it.
Those are some things to be proud about. 50% of those projects you're working on towards zero carbon. Let's talk about that for a minute. I'm a fan of credentials, education, and something you had mentioned to me earlier is tell us about the Path for Zero Carbon, the series that you and the team are working on.
Yeah. So this University of Washington Founders Hall project, we did an analysis on how much of the carbon was captured within the LEED system and how much wasn't. And we came up with is 50, 60% of the carbon was not captured within the LEED system, or at least not quantified within the LEED system. And, this is a mass timber, low energy building, so maybe it's higher than the average building or a higher percentage than the average building. But that really led us to an aha moment of, well, if we're missing a lot of the carbon on these, forward-looking buildings, what carbon are we missing, and what can we do about that? So also we're transitioning from talking about energy use to carbon. So it's not a direct translation. You can't just say, I reduced 1 unit of energy, therefore I reduced 1 unit of carbon. It's a whole different conversation. So, and also in 2018, in our Sustainable Action Plan, we said we want to design at least one net zero building by 2023. And we thought that was a pretty good goal to have. Well, we got lots of them now. So all those things said, all right, we need to update our Sustainable Action Plan for the future, for the year 2030 or something around there. And that needs to include all the forms of carbon emissions associated with the built environment. So we're working on a 20-part fail forward series right now, where we're talking to brilliant people, some of our competitors in the architecture field, people at universities, experts all over the place, and trying to figure out what is a quick way to summarize in 60,000 words or so with lots of graphics, what does a carbon neutral building look like? And so we have the first 3 published. The next 3 are about to be published in the next couple of weeks, probably will be published by the time this comes out. And then we're going to wrap it up this fall. And it's a collaboration. It's meant to just illuminate ourselves and then possibly help some other people figure out what carbon neutrality looks like.
Wow. Well, if there's anything we can link to here, I'll definitely share that. Hopefully our listeners can check that out. I agree. It's one thing for operating carbon and the energy models, programs like LEED and then embodied carbon, and just there's so many other ways to get to maybe what we'd call a total carbon. In your case, you're focused on zero. Just makes sense. All right. So we've talked about what's keeping you busy, plenty busy, but I hear the passion here. You still love this work. How about the future, though? If you had a crystal ball, what's next in this green building movement?
Yeah. Well, I think we've seen a bit of the future in that it is all electric or mostly all electric. It uses heat pumps instead of gas or electric resistance. 100% efficiency isn't enough for our buildings. We need heat pumps with 300, 400, 500% efficiency. We need great envelopes, great design. I think in terms of buildings, that's where we're going. We need grid interactivity in our buildings. We can reduce the cost of building 100% renewable energy significantly by having grid-friendly buildings. That's a post I'm working on right now. And there's lots of pieces of it individually. I think the Inflation Reduction Act is going to really jumpstart a lot of this. And we're seeing in, cities and states across the country an interest in sustainability. Now, some legislatures are trying to go backwards on sustainability. But then you look at like Georgia right now, building all the EVs, getting all the EV power plants, right? Or EV battery extraction and creation and building new cars. It's like, well, that's part of the transition. So we really, I think for the first time in the last year, have had kind of national significant action on all the things we need to do: electrification of transportation, electrification of buildings, and all the other pieces. And part of that is the social justice piece of that, and it's harder to talk about, but it's living wage jobs for lots of people. It's being more inclusive when we have hiring practices, and we do that on many of our projects where we have a certain percentage set aside for women, minority-owned businesses. But it's a lot more than that. It's trying to make the system work for many, many more people than it currently works for. And that's a whole nother conversation. But it's part of the climate action, climate justice kind of conversation that we're having. And I think the Inflation Reduction Act has a good bit of that in there. I think some of it was struck at the last moment, but it's got at least starting down that right path.
Yeah, that is a glimpse of the future to all our listeners. I agree with everything we just heard. Hey, let's do some rapid fire questions here, get to know you more. What would you say is your specialty or gift?
Oh, in meetings, it's I don't like to cut people off, but it's cutting people off. I run meetings and being able to cut people off quickly to keep a meeting focused. I think that's important.
Oh, can you give us a pro tip? Is it do you justify it, or do you just say, "Hey, we got to get back to the agenda. Let's put that over here on the get to it later"? I don't know. What's a pro tip on how to do that gracefully?
It's this goes to like watching David Letterman work on his series. Next guest needs no introduction. He keeps it interesting. He keeps it on point, and he asks clarifying questions. And sometimes that brings you back to the main point. So how does this affect what main topic we're talking about? Because I work with lots of technical people, and man, they can go down rabbit holes for and so bring it back. What's the big picture here? Are we really talking about the big picture, or are you just really excited because you don't get to talk about this subject very often?
I see. That's good. That's a master interviewer there. All right. Well, any good habits, routines, rituals that you have you could share?
Yes. Keep myself interested in what I'm doing. And if I'm not interested, then maybe it's not the thing I need to be doing. So, and I have music to help me with that a little bit as well. But, keeping myself interested in what I'm doing, I think is really important. I think a lot of people get, the main thing we fight in the sustainability world is inertia in NUE boredom, doing things the way, it's easy to design and build a building that doesn't produce energy use. Hard to change that mindset, and doing it over and over can lead to, fatigue. So making sure I stay interested so I can help direct the conversation. I play sports. I think that helps me. I play music. I think that helps me. And then I choose not to work on the weekends and spend time with my family instead. And I think that's a ritual that, on weekdays, I might work a whole lot. But, except for a Saturday morning when nobody else is awake at my house, I'm not
good.
Engaged in work. And I think that really keeps me fresher a little bit.
Thanks for giving us a peek into your world and those pro tips, what works for you. Hey, as we get to know each other more, I'm a fan of the bucket list. Are there one or two things maybe on your bucket list you could share?
I don't have a bucket list, actually. That's a really good question. I don't know what's on your bucket list.
Okay. So I had a business mentor several years ago mentioned bucket list to me, and I was kind of a smart aleck. And I said, Tim, I think I'm a little young to have a bucket list. And man, that was ignorant. The next day I sent them 10 items. And so for some, it could be adventure, it could be travel, maybe write a book. Well, you've done that. But I have a pretty big bucket list. I have about 100 items on it. I try to do about 5 a year, and some will change in and out. And one example is I maybe could sit behind home plate at a Braves game, and, while that would cost some money, I could probably do it, I kind of want to wait for a special time to do that. And so some are like that. Some are just amazing places I'd love to travel to and experiences. So the bucket list, I think it's important to kind of put some themes to it. And so I don't know, with that being said, if you started a bucket list, what are the first 1 or 2 things you might put on there?
I want to travel the world with my family.
Nice.
That'd be fun. First time I went to Europe and just saw what an older town with pedestrian side streets look like. That was cool.
Yeah. Good. All right, we'll start that bucket list. Let me know as that grows what else you add to it,
Yeah, definitely. Mariners just played the Braves, actually, I think, right now.
So, that's right. Yeah. I'm not talking about those recent results. It was there was a lot of sports happening right now. You mentioned you play sports. What sports do you play?
Yeah, I play soccer. I've played soccer since I was a kid. I limp. I play soccer Wednesdays and I limp every day on Thursday. That's just 47 years old. That's part of it, man. And then on Saturdays, I play basketball with a bunch of men.
Thank you. That's great. Well, and that's what this is about. We've connected the dots in your career, how you get into architecture and sustainability, and now what helps you kind of perform at a high level. So thanks for giving us a peek into that show. So my next one, I changed this recently. It used to be, is there a book you'd recommend? But I've expanded it. A book, a podcast, a TED Talk, a documentary. I don't know. Is there something you'd recommend for listeners?
I just listened to the audiobook of Invisible Women, and that was pretty awesome. I mean, pretty eye-opening book. And then I listened to David Roberts Bolt's podcast as well. Okay. And recently, I don't know. I read lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Other stuff.
Those are good recommendations. You've had some other ones with Letterman, now this podcast, this book. So I will make sure these are good show notes in our podcast show notes. I'll make sure everybody has the link here. 2 things, 2 more questions. One is career advice. Is there anything you wish you'd have known a little earlier in your career?
I have this theory that, if someone learns something everything really early in their career, then they're not excited about as much later in their career. So I feel like it's unfolded in an interesting way. And I feel like I'm just slow enough at getting things that when I finally get something, I'm excited about it and can teach it to other people. Whereas a lot of people might already know it. So they're not as excited about teaching it to other people. So I feel like my kind of slower method of learning things means I'm more interested in teaching or communicating with others about this new concept.
Right. That's good. Yeah. That's interesting. You're right. You got to leave yourself a little room to go through the school of hard knocks sometimes too. But if there's any wisdom, we like to share that here, which you've done. Last question. So let's say someone's listening to your interview and they're getting really excited about this green building movement. Maybe they've recently jumped in, maybe they made a career change, or maybe they're a little younger in their career. But if they're just now jumping in, do you have any words of encouragement for them?
Now's the time that people who've been working in the green building movement have been waiting for 20, 30 years. It's happening. It's just about needing more people to pull on the oars. And so find what you're passionate about, pull on the oars. It's happening, and it's a dream come true for a lot of people that we're tackling all these issues. It doesn't mean they're solved, but there's a common way forward that I think a lot of people see. So if you're young and you're in the industry, this is 20 years ago when I joined, sustainability was not a career path. It was probably the least likely career path for anybody to think, oh, I'm going to, be successful and someone's going to want to interview me someday on sustainability. No, people were like, well, whatever, that maybe it'll take off someday. Well, it's taken off. So it's now a career path. So learn as much as you can. And good luck. We need you.
I need you. And I love the visual of the oars. And you're right. For those who've been doing it a long time, it's like, and this is happening. So everybody check out Kjell's LinkedIn profile, send a message, check out all these good references. And I just want to say thanks for what you've done for our industry. I love the fact that over half of your projects are heading towards zero carbon, and you're really leading the way. So thanks for spending time with us today on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Good to talk.
I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.